All right, well, I will start us off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first in our series of virtual lunch and learns. I'm Jillian Robertson. I work at the Haskayne Career Development Centre, and I support a new Master of Management program, which is a 10-month compressed master's program for students who have a background in arts, engineering, science, and under 3 years of work experience. I would love to welcome everyone to learn about the topic of remote work. In the past couple months, we've all moved to working online, whether that be through classes or through work. And it's presented us with a number of challenges: workplace setup, managing different distractions, working with people in the house. Today, we have Avanti with us, and they'll be sharing how they have adjusted the workforce to working remotely and share best practices and tips for all of us to be effective. First, I'd like to thank the team behind the scenes. Pascal Theriot and Angie Duong are part of the human resources team at Avanti, and they took on this project and made it all happen. So thank you so much. And I'd like to welcome and thank our guest speakers, Amin Lalani and David Owen Cord, who are the co-CEOs of Avanti. I've had a pleasure of meeting a number of the team members over at Avanti, and I think we're in really great hands today. If you can flip to the next slide briefly, I'll just share what is next for us. Topics that are upcoming are virtual networking, coping with the loss or deferral of a summer job, and how to succeed in your virtual job search. So sign on to CareerLink and join us for those. And I will hand it over to Amin. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jillian. Appreciate the kind words in the intro there, and we'll certainly echo those sentiments to Angie and Pascal on our team, and Kelly and Becky as well, who really contributed, and I can see a couple of familiar faces here who have volunteered their time to be on the panel, and Carson, John, Shomi, and Raf. So really appreciate everyone on our team helping out here, and then of course we're very grateful to the Haskayne Career Development Centre for involving us in the lunch and learn sessions. We've hired several alumni from Haskayne, both undergrads and grads, and we continue to be impressed by the caliber of the people and of the education. And in our world, our business and its success is entirely predicated on our ability to attract, hire, engage, and develop our people. And so partnering with institutions like the University of Calgary, are paramount to enabling our people first strategy. So really appreciate the opportunity. Excited to be here as well. So we'll start with a couple of intros. I'm Amin, as Julie mentioned, from selling mixtapes when CD burners came out to building websites for bar money to founding a now defunct mobile app startup. I've always been passionate about entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur. And along the way, I've spent several years working in the financial services sector, and was able to have the opportunity to marry my expertise in investing with my passion for entrepreneurship when I led the acquisition of Avanti Software back in 2016 from its CEO and founder. And since then, despite my persisting love for the Maple Leafs, which I know is not going to get a lot of love on this call, I have converted into a full-on Calgarian as the co-CEO of Avanti, a now 40-year-old Calgary-born tech company. My professional accountabilities include overseeing our go-to-market strategy and our product market fit. I work closest with our sales and marketing and product and development teams. And at the same time, Dave and I share some accountabilities across our people and finance teams. Over the last 3.5 years, and hopefully for many to come, we've been and will continue to be building a strongly aligned organization with a diverse group of amazing people working within a collaborative and high performance environment. Dave, you want to give your quick overview?
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm less a Leafs fan, but also a Toronto transplant who's arrived here in Calgary and really embraced it as home. And from a career standpoint in somewhat similar fashion to me, and really started out in financial services, and through both a period in investment banking and private equity, really saw some of the the aspects and benefits of taking an outside-in approach, which is typical of an investor, and quickly came to realize a very significant desire on my part to truly own the accountability and actions within an organization. And that's what led me to Avanti with Amin. And at Avanti, I really oversee what we call the client experience part of our organization, which involves support, implementation, and client success, as well as finance. Been a fantastic ride so far, and as Amin said, looking forward to many years to come.
So as Jillian mentioned, we're going to cover several different topics today. Look, our hope is to be valuable to you all by sharing our perspective on how we think about sort of remote or distributed working, what we're doing in this current environment, as well as some ideas for success in a digitally transforming professional landscape. Throughout, we're going to be running some polls before turning it to our panelists for some Q&A, and I'll thank everyone in advance for their engagement and participation in making this a great session. So we'll start first by chatting about what we like to call internally as Zoom etiquette, and you should take this as much as a opportunity for us to level set this meeting, as well as taking this as an example of what to do for future Zoom meetings. I listened to an address actually by Satya Nadella this morning. He's the CEO of Microsoft, and he was speaking at the virtual Microsoft Build conference. And one thing that he remarked really stuck with me. He mentioned that the current pandemic has catalyzed almost 2 years of corporate digital transformation into a period of 2 months. So needless to say, video conferencing has emerged as a ubiquitous means of communicating for companies and their teams. And while there are so many different platforms available for use, you can think about this as Zoom etiquette, Hangouts etiquette, Blue Jeans etiquette, whatever you want, any type of video conferencing platform. There's lots of different tips and tricks that you can deploy to ensure you get maximum impact here. So I'll just rattle off a few. To start, be your authentic self, right? Just because you're on camera doesn't mean you should feel the need to change who you are or how you act. In this particular meeting, we're going to give you license to be comfortable. If you need to grab a glass of water, you need to eat lunch. It is a lunch and learn session after all. You should absolutely feel comfortable to do so. Certainly, to the extent you don't want this in any of your meetings, just set the expectation of how you'd like folks to act during the meeting as well at the outset. What we have on the screen here is really a little bit more around respect for one another. We ask that everyone turn on their video. Obviously, there's an increased degree of connection and connectivity to your team this way. And there's also some mutual accountability in staying engaged and, trying not to look at the notifications blinking up on your cell phone. And so, we always ask that of our team as well. And then at the same time, would ask that everyone keep their microphones muted when not speaking, and if it's possible or comfortable to use headphones, just to reduce the amount of echo that you can sometimes get on these calls. A couple other last tricks here, different by video provider, but in Zoom for sure, definitely encourage enabling dual monitors as one of the settings, as well as gallery view. I have you all up on a screen here where I can see at least 12 or 15 faces, which is awesome. And then a couple things that we've been doing recently that have been really helpful is actually hiding the self view. Certainly helps actually stay engaged rather than focusing on your little square and how you look on the video chat. And so that's been really good. And then you can also, so you can just right click your square and hit hide self view. And there's also another option to hide non-video participants. So those who have the video are the ones showing up on the screen, and I find that helpful so that I'm not looking at a bunch of black boxes that say, video not here. and look, throughout, I think we're also going to be testing out some of the functionality as it relates to doing polls. So I'll turn it over to Pascal and Jillian to give us a quick poll demonstration here, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Amin. Hi, everyone. My name is Pascal. As Jillian said, I'm the talent acquisition specialist with Avanti. So thanks for tuning in today. We're just going to test out the poll function for the first time here. So this should be popping up on everyone's screen. So go for it, and then we'll discuss the results shortly afterwards. Cool. I think we'll end it there because the rest of us are Avantians and Jillian herself. So cool. UFC business. That is probably a good sign for you, Jillian. But thank you to all the rest of you who showed up as well. And it's awesome that we're able to collaborate all together in these trying times.
Totally. Thanks, Pascal. Really appreciate that.
All right, I'll hop in here and just chat a little bit about Avanti and talk about who we are as a company, what we do, and what are the values we hold dear and that inform the behaviors in terms of how we approach operating day in, day out. So starting first with who we are, really when I think about why do I get up in the morning? Why do I find my work meaningful? Why Avanti? Why not some other business? It really is around our core purpose, which is to improve Canadian companies by helping them build better workplaces. And really, when we think about that kind of guiding light, it's a great measure for us in terms of, is the work we do contributing to that ultimate cause? And one of the, I would say, best parts about working at Avanti is this concept of a magnifier effect. So we're just under 80 people today, and those 80 people are mostly in Calgary, though spread out across Toronto, Vancouver, and Edmonton as well. But among those 80 people, because of the nature of our software, which is generally used to serve mid to large enterprises, we actually have a much greater impact than a small group of 80 people might otherwise. And that is the result of, by the nature, again, of our clients having a large number of employees. We actually touch, as a group of 80, almost 200,000 Canadians or folks across Canada who are paid or who use or interact with our system in some way, which is about 1% of the labor force. So definitely when I think about, having a purpose that really motivates me and keeps me engaged, it really comes from that knowledge that we have a massive impact across a large workforce, and that we do that in the effort to serve Canadian companies build better workplaces. Maybe I'll go next. And so what does that actually mean? How do we help companies leverage technology to enhance their workplaces? Really, that's through what we call our integrated HCM suite. And that basically means that we provide a full suite of cloud-based HR and payroll solutions. So a client who purchases our entire suite of software will be able to access each of these modules, which really starts with payroll, of course, the most intuitive or foundational part of the software, and then expands to many of the other interesting aspects in which technology can continue to enhance employees and also companies and how they interact with their workforce, whether that's around scheduling, managing their time, vacation requests, in the case of shift workers, managing shifts and how those are coordinated. And as any organization knows, managing what is one of their most important functions, which is recruiting new folks and onboarding them in an effective way using technology. And then I think, actually go back one slide, sorry. I think we're gonna, Pascal, I might turn over to you. We're gonna run a little poll here. Before we talk about Avanti's values, it would be interesting just to hear, would love to hear from the audience, what are your values? What are the most important values that come to mind when you think about an organization that you'd like to join or aspire to? And then we'll chat a little bit about what our organizational core values are and some thoughts on those in general.
Thanks, Dave. And we're just going to be using the chat function for this one, just because you can't have an open-ended question on the polling. Yeah.
Gotcha. All
yeah.
right. Well,
So it's in the chat. So feel free, everyone, to go and write something down in there right now.
cool. See, authenticity, transparency. I think those are good ones. Humility, integrity, safety, teamwork, collaboration, opportunity for growth, autonomy, creativity, respect. Opportunities for learning, innovation. Nice. These are some great ones. Engaged leadership, improving the community trust, social responsibility. Totally. Maybe we'll give 10 more seconds there, see if any others trickle in, and we'll chat a little bit about how we think about values and maybe some perspective we can share that's hopefully important for you, especially when you think about, you know, where you sit in terms of the career lifeline, which is obviously at that early stage. Having fun, nice, caring. Okay, thanks. So we're going to share a little bit about our values, but maybe just before I talk through our particular values, one thing I'd say is, look, you know, when we think about the importance of values, we think about it in this way. Values are neither right nor wrong. They're neither good nor bad. They really are just ultimately the way in which any given organizations tries to guide their employees' behavior and make a point about what's important to them at a given point in time. So with that in mind, when I look at some of the values that you've shared in the chat here, trust, improving the community, engaged leadership, you know, just because those aren't necessarily the values that we really prioritize in our organization doesn't mean those aren't great things, are important things. And so I always try and frame that for people, that there's really no right or wrong as you think about values. You really want to have a good understanding, and I would encourage each of you, especially in kind of the earlier phase of your career, to really reflect on what are the things you value, what's important to you. Because ultimately, when you find an organization that has alignment in terms of your values and their values, that's where you're going to be most successful. Because generally, organizations reward individuals that epitomize or act as role models as it relates to the values that are important to that organization. And again, that's neither right nor wrong. It's not to say, you know, our values are the best ones, and you know, you should look at others and think, oh, well, they're not as good as Avanti's. It really is just the appropriate values for the appropriate organization. So with that lead in, what are our values? What are Avanti's core values? Really, starting in the top left here, we describe it as with open arms, and it really relates to inclusivity. And for us, the way we think about that is ensuring that we create a psychologically safe space in which anyone can share their opinion, regardless of who they are, where they're from, their age, their seniority, their experience. At the end of the day, we want to create that space so that anyone is able to share their opinion or perspective on something, because as a result, we believe that's how you foster the best ideas and allow for the most honest and authentic conversation. The second point here in the top right is really around integrity, doing what you say. And we often refer to this as someone's measure of effectiveness in their say-do ratio. Having a high say-do ratio would suggest almost everything I say, or everything I say I actually do. And look, if you think about, I'm sure you've had experiences with friends, with maybe family members, with professors, you know, the ones that really can demonstrate that they not only put a stake in the ground, but then hold themselves accountable for what they say and live up to that. Really, that's a great way to foster trust and encourage reliability and effectiveness. The third point in the bottom left here is around how we think about innovation. And there's obviously, it's certainly not uncommon to consider innovation an important core philosophy or value as part of an organization. I think the way we think about it is, innovation does not need to mean that you are coming up with this groundbreaking, earth-shattering idea no one's thought of. It's thinking big but starting small. As much as we love the crazy AI or NLP use cases that really take step function leaps in terms of innovation, we also really value the small tweaks, like something as simple as throwing a label on where the dishes are in the kitchen, so no one has to fish through 5 different drawers just to find a spoon. It's those small, simple changes that actually are extremely valuable, and in culmination or cumulatively over time can actually have a massive impact. And then the last is just around really impact and making your mark. Ultimately what we care about is delivering amazing outcomes, as opposed to, the number of hours you work, or, how much effort you put into something. At the end of the day, we really want to see the mark you make as a output of the effort you put into it. And we can go to the next one. So you've heard a few times now us refer to distributed when we're talking about a workforce, which is a little bit different than, I think, the concept of remote. And the reason we focus a little bit on this concept of distributed, which is really defined as a workforce that reaches beyond the restrictions of a traditional office environment. And the reason we like to think about that and challenge ourselves as an organization is, ultimately there's a bit of a different mindset when you're talking about remote versus distributed. And with remote, you're almost inherently implying that if you're not in the office, you are working remotely. You are away from that central power, which is the physical office. Whereas the concept of a distributed workforce, which again, this is a nuanced difference, but is really that you're a workforce distributed across a geography, potentially different time zones, and you extend yourselves beyond a traditional office environment. And the reason we challenge ourselves internally at Avanti in terms of really thinking distributed as opposed to thinking remote is, there's a lot of, in some ways, benefits or ways in which the medium, meaning working outside of a physical office, can be leveraged. And we're going to talk about that in a few moments. But I do think that is how we challenge ourselves to make sure we aren't just trying to translate exactly what we had into the office into a remote workforce. We're actually trying to say, what are the advantages of not being in one physical space, and how do we make sure we leverage those? So we really, at the end of the day, ultimately like to say we are a passionate bunch of people on a mission to help Canadian companies build better workplaces.
I'm just going to pop in here again with a quick poll kind of on this topic for everyone.
Great. Thanks, Pascal.
All right, just going to share the results with everyone. So the question obviously was, what is your current perception of working or studying from home? 1 being terrible, the absolute worst, and 5 being greater than you ever imagined. So yeah, Dave and Amin, I don't know if you guys want to discuss this quickly.
Nice. No, it's that was great to see, Pascal. I mean, it looks like about half of people are in that kind of 4 out of 5 camp, and no one's in the terrible camp, which is good. But obviously there's a bit of a distribution there. And look, I think that's certainly timely. And with that in mind, I think we'll try and share a little bit about, how Avanti's been tackling the challenges of a distributed workforce, and then also share some kind of tips and perspective on how we think you can be most effective in this type of environment, which obviously, basically 100% of knowledge workers have been thrust into in the last 10 weeks. So why don't we flip to the next one, and we'll talk a little bit specifically just on a couple key categories. The first is around technology. And I think, going back to that concept of remote versus distributed, one thing that's inherently true is when we're all distributed and working together, we actually have an opportunity to leverage technology in a way we might not otherwise in the office. So let me give you an example. One thing you might see in a meeting with Avantians is we'll have 5 folks on a Zoom, and someone might be sharing their screen and potentially, let's say we're discussing a presentation and we're walking through, hey, here's what we have in mind. Well, now, because, unlike an office meeting room where likely you'd have the same 5 folks sitting in a meeting room with one person controlling the screen or holding the single keyboard that's logged in remotely to share their screen, that person can now say, hey, does anyone else want to take control? Does anyone else want to share their screen? And maybe we can cover down some notes and actually type it out. And instead of, going through the effort, for example, of that individual logging off, letting someone else log in, it's as simple as stop share and someone else hopping on. So I use that example maybe as a point that I think there are a lot of interesting ways in which you can use technology effectively in a distributed manner. And the other piece that I think is kind of an expectation is when we first, and when I say that the royal we, I really mean, our entire country, and in particular workforces that transition to a full working from home environment. And I think a lot of people had a bit of a mindset of, what, this is going to be brutal. This could take 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I don't know how long, but I can't wait to get back to the office. And so their baseline expectation was, my technology's got to get me through this next short-term period before I go back. But the reality is, as unfortunately as has been true, and as it being now May 19th and already kind of 10 weeks into this working remotely or working outside of a physical office environment, it's become clear that really I would set a bar of my technology needs to enable me to work as effectively from home or from, frankly, wherever, as I might otherwise be in the office. And if that's your bar, that's the mindset you should be, I think, embracing. The second piece is around enhanced communication. Without the so-called cooler talk or pass-by conversation in the hallway, you really need alternative forums to enhance or substitute the communication that's going to be lost as a result. And so we really think about that across a couple different ways, both in terms of folks who lead people and have direct reports and how they engage with them, between the Avanti leadership team and between the leadership team with all Avantians. And I think we've really tried to both increase the availability and access to individuals in the organization through, for example, open access meeting invites to Avanti leaders, through things like Ask Me Anything conversations where you can participate by sharing anonymized questions related to what's going on with the business, what's going on with, frankly, whatever's on your mind. So really making sure that just because we aren't in the office doesn't mean there aren't great ways in which we can have communication. And I would say, back to the leveraging the medium, frankly, one good thing about being in a distributed or working in a distributed manner is there's less likely to be, the broken telephone. Hey, I had a conversation with Dave Amin. This is what I heard. And then by the time that's passed on to the 7th person in the hallway, it's actually quite a different message. And so in some ways, it really forces us to make sure we're communicating and using writing in an effective manner. The next is somewhat related, but really around kind of team building and connections. And look, I think, as probably everyone can attest to on who's participating here, it's tough from a social standpoint. And being in certainly, this isn't just distributed work or working from home. This is working in a pandemic from home. And so when you don't have those kind of social outlets that you might otherwise have, it's tough. And so we've really tried to think about how can we substitute some of what people are missing from their normal life through, regular, what we call the virtual coffee buddies, but, weekly meetings or games such as scavenger hunts and charades that allow people to participate, share a laugh, joke around in a way that we would typically do in the office, but is something that's unavailable at the moment. And then, on fourth here is kind of redefining how we work. I'm not sure if there's any parents with young children on the call, but if there are, that I'm sure they can appreciate that, working 9 to 5 or whatever your normal hours are in a physical office space is a little more clearly defined than it is when you can step into an office and have your 5-year-old knocking on the door who might not necessarily appreciate the concept of, hey, I'm actually currently in my work mode. And so we've tried to establish a clear guidelines in terms of making sure people understand that's totally fine. If what were traditional office hours don't work for you, that's arguably not what's important, right? What's arguably important is, are you able to deliver on your accountabilities and meet your objectives? And that's much more important than saying, hey, I want to know your butts in this seat from this period to that period. And ultimately that ties in really closely with the concept of prioritizing yourself first and self-care. And because if you don't do that, if you're not your best self, you're not going to be the best you could be in the workplace. And so I'll maybe turn it over to you, Amin, because I think that this fifth concept is arguably the most important and one that's worth spending a little more time on.
Yeah, certainly. And it's definitely one that is easy to get lost in a time like this, right? And so at Avanti, we use something that we call the self-family job pyramid, the SFJ pyramid. And so if you can with me, consider this little icon you're seeing here and the pyramid, right? The size and the shape of the pyramid in each layer is generally reflective of the time you spend with each, right? And so thinking about your job, average employee spends 90,000 hours at work over the course of their career. So that is the, base of the pyramid, the biggest slice there. You obviously spend a lot of time with your family thereafter, and the smallest amount of time that you have is for the self bucket, right? And unfortunately, in the sort of corporate world we live in too many instances, we see a prioritization and a rationalization that follows the amount of time spent. So putting someone's job first, family second, self third, and often rationalizing that type of prioritization with sentences like, hey, if I work really hard at my job, I'll make enough money or get promoted. And if I do those things, then my family will be happy. Right. And you extend that sort of line of thinking that, hey, if I'm happy, if my family's happy, then I'll be happy. Right. And unfortunately, that can really lead to a lot of burnout and unhappiness. So what we like to encourage our people and what we recommend folks think about, especially at a time like this, is really prioritizing from the top down, acknowledging that the time is spent the way that the pyramid is depicted. The prioritization of what you do and how you spend your time to accomplish, we don't like to call it work-life balance, we call it work-life harmony, right? You have to find a situation that works for you in light of all the responsibilities that you have in each of these three elements, right? And we like to turn those sentences and those rationalizations to something more along the lines of, if I'm physically, emotionally, and mentally in a good place for myself, then I will be happy, I'll be present, I'll be engaged. And if you are all of those things, happy, present, engaged, then you will do so with your family and they will be happy because they will be getting the best out of you. And when you are in a really good place, both with yourself as well as with your family, that really enables you to bring your best every day to work, and spend those 90,000 hours over the course of your career as productive as possible. So, from our standpoint, it's the expectation that our employees treat their lives this way. And it's not lip service or platitudes to, hey, we love work-life balance. This is actually what we expect of people. And it truly does. It is in our best interest as a company to ask our people to prioritize themselves and their family over their jobs, because as I said, what it does is enables the hours on the job to be that much more productive. So one little exercise I'll share with you that we've shared with our team, and I would encourage you, if you're up for it, taking the time to go ahead and actually do, is think about a week. You have 7 days, 24 hours a day. That gives you 168 hours in a week. So maybe on a Sunday evening, take that 168, subtract about 49 for sleep, 48 to make the math easy here. Assuming folks sleep 6 to 8 hours a day. I know when I was in in college, that number might have been slightly different than it is now. But that leaves you 120 hours, right? And so really try and allocate, look back on your last week and think about how did you spend those 120 hours? How much of it actually was on you versus your family versus at or on activities related to your job, right? And maybe as you perform that exercise, think about your next week. Lay out some of all the commitments that you have, and really what you'll find is it's difficult to really carve out time for yourself, but it's not impossible. And when you lay it out as such and you follow the priority, you make sure that you actually hit those hours that are dedicated to yourself and to your family.
Awesome. Thanks, Amin. I'm just going to chime in with the last poll here as well, because I think it kind of goes nicely with the SFJ pyramid we just discussed, as well as a good segue to the next piece. So I will launch the poll here, but the question is, which of the following options has been most significant challenge for you in adapting to learning or working from home? All right, I'll share the results here.
That's super interesting. It's good to know that everyone is equipped with good technology and hasn't been experiencing a lot of issues. I think one of the things that weighs on us in a situation where there's this forced transition to working in a distributed manner is those who lack access to technology and the appropriate resources really bear the brunt of this type of change, and it's really unfavorable in light of the sort of socioeconomic disparities, in our society. And so I'm glad everyone here has got their tech working, which is awesome. And then it's interesting to see quite a varied split across some of the challenges. I don't know, Dave, if you have any other reactions.
No, I think it shows, which I think is natural, which is everyone faces a bit of a different challenge when you think about, working in an environment which you're not quite used to. And I think actually, Amin, on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some trips for success. And I think, Amin, I know you're going to speak to this, but talking about temporal and spatial boundaries, I think is a great way to kind of frame some of the approaches we've seen work well as it relates to those challenges, which for what it's worth, in reading those results, I feel like depending on the day of the week or the week of the month, I could have checked every single one of them except for technology myself.
That's right.
Definitely not. You're not only are you not the only one, you're not crazy at all for feeling any of those type of reactions. But look, why don't we talk a little bit about some tips and tricks from our standpoint as it relates to the shoes you stand in, and obviously thinking about career opportunities and how to approach some of what is maybe the typical channels you might target, but is obviously a very different environment today than it was a year or two ago. So first on networking, in some ways, what's more challenging in this type of environment is you don't have any of the kind of in-person type events you would normally have, nor do you have the random interactions, right? You're not going to be out at a restaurant and bump into someone you haven't seen in 3 months who happened to be working at a new company that happened to be, someone who might think you're interested in and try and set you up. So that's the downside, but let me actually talk about some of the positives of networking in this type of period, which is no one's traveling. Everyone is at home, they're at home. And so in some ways, you're actually well positioned, I think, to get a coffee or a Zoom and of course, a virtual coffee or a phone call with someone who otherwise might have been a lot less accessible. And I, for what it's worth, I've had one or two coffee chats with students myself, particularly in the start of this environment. And I think some of the hesitation I heard from their end was, I don't want to be disrespectful and asking for these type of conversations or trying to network in what, for a lot of companies is a really challenging period. But what I advised them and what I'd say to you is, let them, or let whoever you're interested in speaking with, let them be the ones to dictate whether they're interested in having the conversation or not. Don't let the potential of someone saying no limit your interest or ambition in asking for a conversation. I think you actually might find much better success in this type of environment in terms of people actually being available to speak with you than you might otherwise. And so I'd encourage you to use this as an opportunity. Don't be shy to ask for the virtual coffee. Don't be shy to ask for the phone call and see what comes of it, because you really do never know.
Yeah, to quote Wayne Gretzky there, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So
Great. Next one's standing out in a virtual hiring process. And this is an interesting one. We recently participated in what's called the Tech West Collective, which is just a group of local tech organizations who put on a bit of a virtual career fair. And I think there was 8 companies that participated, and we spoke on this topic. So I'll try and relay what I think the key themes are. And I think, frankly, they very much apply at Avanti, but I really do think this is broad advice that applies to almost everyone. And companies generally love people who embrace a few things. One is a demonstration of ambition or proactivity, an interest in learning and that concept of being a lifelong learner, and a demonstration of discipline or ability of holding oneself accountable. And I think there's a lot of ways to really do that in a way that's actually still fun and interesting. And where I'm going with this is, it doesn't matter so much what your passion is, but if you have a passion in something, take a course on it, read a book on it, watch a documentary on it, listen to a podcast on it. In some ways it's less important, again, that because you're talking to a software company, you have to love coding. Well, sure, for certain roles that's true, but even just having read 5 biographies in the space, like that can be something that's maybe enjoyable, but also demonstrates, hey, when you say you're passionate about something, you actually take some action to demonstrate that. So I actually think there's a ton you can do here to really say, you know what, school was off. I was stuck at home, but instead of just watching, Tiger King all day, I actually read these 5 books, watched these 2 courses, whatever it might be. I think that's less important and more that you just make good use of the time. The third piece around presenting your best self. Look, I think everyone's seen the videos of the students graduating. I don't know if this applies to you, but the suit on the top and underwear in the bottom half. I think the reality is, like, you got to know the environment, the type of company you're interacting with. What is their expectations? If it's a really formal organization and the individual on the other side of the line is gonna still put on his suit or her suit every day, well, then I might follow suit. If it's Amin and he's going to be wearing a baseball cap and a t-shirt, follow suit, right? Try and be consistent with the organization or individual you're interacting with. And the other piece of that is, look, I think we can all appreciate in this type of environment, there's going to be distractions. There's going to be, a dog that pops up, etc. But the reality is, to the extent you can minimize distractions, that's great as well. And then the last piece on virtual onboarding for anyone who will be starting a role, in a new onboarding or in a new company, that's obviously very different than starting off in the office. Some advice I'd say is don't be shy to introduce yourself. You're going to be included in meetings, calls. Don't feel you're stepping on people's toes or being, too outspoken. People want to be introduced to you. They want to get to know you, and don't be shy to do that. Don't be hesitant to ask for conversations. If you want to meet someone, get to know them, ask for something, say, hey, can we grab a virtual coffee chat? People generally like that. And it's a great way to build those relationships and rapport early on. And maybe I'll pass it over to you now. I mean,
totally. And I know we're trying to get to a panel here, so I'll be really quick. But assuming you do everything Dave sort of mentioned, and you're now sort of at your new job, which is still in a distributed workforce environment, there's a couple other things, we sort of encourage folks to think about. So the first is the concept of maintaining your physical and social boundaries. There's been a lot of studies around how folks demarcate the transition from work to non-work using what are called boundary crossing activities. So think about, putting on your work clothes, to use an example that Dave gave, or your commute that you typically had from work to home, or home to school in some of your cases, right? Those are physical and social indicators to your mind that you have transitioned from home you to work you, or work you to home you. So maintaining these boundaries when you work in a distributed manner is really important, right? So while in the short term, it's probably nice that you can roll out of bed and you're at your office and you don't have to catch the morning train, in the long run, maintaining that boundary crossing activity is really important. So, for example, consider replacing your commute to work or commute to school with a 20-minute walk around the neighborhood, right? That's still a great activity to maintain that boundary crossing activity while actually not having to commute to work. The second is really around maintaining temporal boundaries, and I think Dave captured it well for working parents or those who are trying to integrate elder care responsibilities during their regular work hours. It's challenging enough, even pre-COVID, with our mobile devices and everything that we have to really focus on maintaining these temporal boundaries. And sticking to a 9-to-5 schedule at this point is basically unrealistic, right? And so I encourage you all to sort of find work time budgets that suit you, and be conscious and respectful of the fact that you work with others. And that's where transparency and over communicating become incredibly clear. We have parents who sort of, on their status message on Microsoft Teams, they say, hey, I'm available, I'm working from 8 to 11, and then I'm parenting from 11 to 1, and so on and so forth. Just extremely clear about their schedule. If we're getting pings from them at 8 p.m., we know exactly why. We all have to accommodate one another based on our unique circumstances. And so both being upfront and clear about what to expect and how to work with one another, as well as communicating that transparently with everyone, is incredibly important. And the last piece is, in working in a distributed fashion, there's a tendency to want to appear productive, right? People can't see you in your office. They can't see you doing work. And so there's this tendency to say, hey, I got to look like I'm doing stuff. And occasionally that can translate into a focus on just busy work or tasks that make you appear productive, which are ultimately counterproductive in the long run. And so at a time like this, where you're forced to work or study from afar, I think it's really important that you prioritize. Spend your time working on the most important things. That's the best thing for the organization, for your career, for your education. And don't worry so much about, always maintaining this aura of I'm busy, just because you can't see me. I promise I am. So, I'll pause there and turn it over to our wonderful group of panelists. Pascal, I don't know if we're doing anything special here, so I'll turn it over to you to direct.
Nope, nothing special planned. Maybe if we could just have each of the panelists introduce themselves quickly.
Sure. I'm John. I came to Avanti about 2 years ago. I'm a software developer. Yeah.
And also a U of C grad.
And a U of C grad, yeah.
My name's Carson, and I started Avanti just over a year and a half ago. And I am a computer science graduate from U of C.
Hey everyone, I'm Raphael. Class of 2019, BCom, and I'm on the client support team, and I've been at Avanti for 11 months now.
Hi everyone, my name is Shomi. I just joined Avanti about 3 months ago. I celebrated my 3-month anniversary yesterday. I'm in the finance/accounting department, and I'm in the MBA class of 2020 as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. So I see the first question in here. I'll just read it out, and we'll see who is best positioned to field it. But how do you see this new way of distributed workforce systems affecting how you recruit and work in the future? Some trends, insights that you foresee would be appreciated. Maybe Dave and Amin, you want to take a first crack at that, or yeah.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I think from a recruit standpoint, probably not particularly different. Obviously, instead of certain meetings that would naturally be, an interview in person, or an experience where we'd have someone in the office, that's moved completely virtually. But to be honest, the cadence, the way we're assessing candidates, most of that was historically digital, and there of course would be an in-person component, but we can totally substitute that digitally. In terms of how that affects work in the future, and especially recruiting in the future, I think it does lend itself to a much, a bit of that mindset of let's find the best quality regardless of the location when it comes to talent. So less concern on we need someone in Calgary, we need someone in Toronto, we need someone in Vancouver. In some ways, that's much less important than we need someone to fill this role who's extremely well suited to fill that role. Let's make sure we find them. We'll still go through the normal process of interviewing and qualifying them, and then let's hire them if they're the best candidate for that role.
Awesome. And maybe to the four recent graduates, what are some of the ways that work has changed for you guys over the last couple of months, or that you foresee it keeping that way over the next few months, I guess, as well, potentially?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at. Oh, John, do you want to go ahead? Okay, I'll take a stab at that one. I actually think it's been positive. On my team in particular, we have to structure how we share information a lot better. That way, everybody has the same access to information, and I think it's led our team to be, number one, way more communicative, and number two, solidify processes for how we communicate with one another. And by that faction, everyone on the team therefore gets the same information.
Anything to add, John?
Maybe
John
or Carson, you want to add a little bit about how the dev team is, deploying new tools and adjusted to the change?
Yeah, for sure. As far as the development team goes, we really use this time at home at the office to kind of work on our training backlog. So our manager will go through training that maybe we didn't have time for before. It's not busy work or anything. It did have to happen. It's just, this is a good opportunity when everybody has their screen right in front of them to share that information across the team, and then we can move forward from there.
And I would say just organizationally, just to add to some of that, we've adopted new tools across several teams, just to ensure that we have the ability to collaborate and communicate and work together, as close as to what we could in the office as now what we can do as a distributed workforce.
Awesome. The next question here is Avanti a distributed workplace? Are there specific offices for specific teams?
It's a great question. We actually we have about 70% of our floor is our office space, and we actually ended up leasing the other side of that too. And we're about to kick off a construction project in the next month to build out that space. And so, in light of what's happened, I think we've certainly started to think a little bit more about what the physical office space will represent in the long run. And if it's not the, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 for every employee in the company, how can you deploy that space in a manner that's really effective in light of that? And so, today I wouldn't say we have a great answer to that, but I think certainly things we have thought about is how can we purpose build spaces, for collaboration or for specific teams, when the development team's doing a big backlog grooming session, what's the technical setup that they need and how much space and so on and so forth. So certainly the current situation has given us a lot of food for thought in terms of how we think about our physical spaces.
Awesome. Thanks, Amin. I'm going to skip to the next, or kind of two questions away, and I'll ask the panelists, the recent grads. How has Avanti supported you guys as employees? Sorry, I don't know if anyone can hear that. I was just getting a phone call, but how has Avanti supported you guys as its employees to focus on self in our distributed or remote workforce? So each of the recent grads, if you guys want to take a stab at that one.
Sure, I can go. We have flexible work hours. So if you have any time that you need for your family, or you have a doctor's appointment, that's as long as you communicate that to your leader. That definitely helps. So basically, we don't have to work like a doctor's appointment around our work schedule. We can fit that right in as well.
To just add to that, one of the nice things was even before the pandemic, at Avanti, we sort of already incorporated life into the way we work. So if you have a doctor's appointment, like Carson was saying, you just have to communicate that. So transitioning into work from home was not a huge deal because we already had that culture going on in the first place. So yeah.
Yeah, I have something to add too. So at Avanti, we'll have kind of a weekly get together. It'll be like kind of a fun activity on Thursdays or Fridays, so everybody can, communicate, have someone to talk to, because I'm sure that there's some people that are fairly alone during this pandemic, and that's a good way just to stay connected to other people outside of work, but kind of at work.
Yeah, and I get on Shomi's point. For sure, it was awesome that we had this culture going in. So I kind of felt that communication stayed the same, and whatever you have going on in your life is important, and it's important to take care of yourself.
Yeah, just two other quick things I'll add is we offer flexible benefits at Avanti as well. And so those can be used to sort of be tailored to your lifestyle. And so whatever self means to you, if that's getting a massage as opposed to seeing a dentist, then so be it. It's sort of your choice. And part and parcel with that is our employee assistance program. So part of our benefits include the ability to reach out and call and discuss challenges that you're having to an independent third party who has nothing to do with Avanti, where we don't, we don't get any reports or results or anything like that. It's just a totally anonymous outlet for folks to use to work through and talk through some of the stresses or challenges in their life. And then, of course, we have internal mechanisms to help folks support that who are struggling. And we really, as an organization, just philosophically place the well-being of our people as paramount, and that's something that from every person, whether it's myself or Dave or anyone in the company, to really continue to prioritize, continue to endorse, and continue to support.
Awesome, thank you. And Jillian, do we have a few minutes here to field the last couple of questions? Or okay, awesome. Perfect. So this one maybe is best for Dave and Amin as well. Do you think that productivity, and efficiency benchmarks change in a distributed workforce compared to being in the office? And if so, how?
Dave, I don't know if you have a perspective on this. I think, again, we sort of set goals for ourselves as an organization, and from there, try to think about the biggest milestones and biggest priorities that we want to see achieved, both as a company as well as within each group. And so those are the benchmarks we care about from an outcome perspective. What I think is interesting is productivity or efficiency is perhaps an indication of how well utilized the team is, and whether or not you can set a more ambitious goal or not. Interestingly, I would say that again, I think part of it is because we were set up as an organization to make the transition to distributed working fairly effectively. But in certain areas, I've seen an actual uptick in productivity as some distractions are removed from your day. Your commute is no longer as long. You're able to quickly bounce from meeting to meeting when it's just a couple of clicks as opposed to walking around. And so, it certainly has not been an erosion of productivity or efficiency. If anything, it's been a bit of a boon to it.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. The only thing I'd say in the check mark box for what I like about distributed working is, it's sometimes, I think, the traditional office environment in some ways almost allows folks who, come in early, dress clean, appear to be busy, almost skate by or sometimes get by, presenting themselves in a busy way when in fact their actual efficiency or productivity might be much less than someone who's, there for 3 hours a day but runs out for lunch or whatever. So I actually think it's a good thing in that I don't believe our metrics or goalposts are changing, but I think it really enforces us to focus on what's most important, which is, are we delivering on the goals? Not, are you in your seat at whatever hour in the day? Are you there late? Are you there early? Which is in some ways just, I think not the right way to focus.
Awesome, thank you. The next question, maybe I'll kind of split into two. So the first portion, how is the remote work environment impacted onboarding? So maybe I'll give that piece to Dave and Amin. And then the second piece I'll field to the panelists. How has it affected learning within the organization in your day-to-day roles? So maybe I'll go with Dave and Amin first, and then to the panelists.
Sure. Yeah, I'll chat a little bit about onboarding. I mean, in some ways, it's actually not dramatically different. The way we typically do onboarding is we have what's called kind of a boot camp, which is, when you start, you would go through a series of meetings with various teams and their leaders, learn a little bit about how that function operates, some of the history, and give you kind of a full perspective on each of the different teams and how they're involved in Avanti and how they work, and also some history and context to the company. We still do that exact same schedule, but it's now delivered via Zoom or remotely. So in some ways, it's not totally different. I think inevitably the key difference, and when I think back to maybe tying this to the tips and tricks for success, is you have a little bit less of that. When you're new somewhere in the first few days, I think most organizations, you'll find folks will do a bit of the pop by, how's it going, how you doing, doing a bit of the check-in. Hey, I can see from your puzzled expression that you're curious or unsure of what to do. Let me just proactively volunteer my help to you. You're not going to have as many of those kind of visual or verbal cues going on to let the team know, hey, subtly I need a little bit of help, or maybe, hey, I'm not quite, I don't want to have to go through the hurdle of proactively bugging someone even though I need help, which might be a lot easier in the office when it's kind of a shoulder tap. So all I'd say is we're encouraging people to remove that barrier. Don't feel the hesitation. Don't feel you are burdening people. And we try and explicitly say that to anyone who is new in terms of onboarding. And I would encourage it, again, just as in terms of hopefully advice for you and as you think about potentially onboarding remotely, is don't be shy. Let someone else turn you down or be the one to say I'm too busy to help, as opposed to you being the one to say, well, they're probably too busy, I might as well not ask.
Awesome, thanks, Dave. So yeah, maybe the second piece to the four panelists: how has remote work or distributed work impacted your day-to-day learning in your roles?
So I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but we've actually found that training has gone a lot smoother remotely, just because everybody can turn on their managers or whoever's presenting. We can look at their screen and watch them do whatever we need to be doing. That part, really good. The other way that we kind of get around the learning aspect is, I don't know if you guys have used Microsoft Teams, but it's kind of like Slack, where it's just one big group chat. So if somebody finds something that they decide that they need to share, they can post it there. And that actually works pretty good, because if a month from now, if I need to find that piece of information again, all I have to do is search some keywords and there I have it. So that kind of works a little bit better than, you know, your manager telling you in a meeting to do it this way, but then you might forget later.
And just to add on to that, for the dev team, we have very open communication as well. So don't be shy if you're actually struggling or need help with something. And Microsoft Teams has really helped with that, because you can share your screen as well, and that person can guide you through there, just looking at your screen. So it's almost like they're almost right beside you, like they can walk over and show you.
Okay.
Anything else to add, Ralph?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but now learning has become a team-wide activity, and it's nice because we can record sessions. So arguably it's a more inclusive learning experience, because I don't have to hear it from someone else. We all share the same class webinar learning experience, and I think that's really important.
Awesome. Show me. Sorry, show me. Do you have anything else to add?
Yes, for me, it's the recording piece has been very helpful. Sorry, can you hear me?
It's cutting in and out a little bit, but give it another shot. Oh,
Sorry. Okay, is it good now? I'm getting a bit of a lag.
Yeah,
there's a bit of a lag, but it's audible though.
The ability to record. Having. Okay, so sorry guys. I've had to do like 80% of my training remotely, and so just having my team members share their screen, and then I just click on snag it and record the session, and I can always go back anytime to view that recording. That's something that I don't think I would be able to do if it was in now, because I was sitting there watching, versus having that resource for me later to go back. So yeah, this transition has been pretty good in my opinion.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, that was, we lost you a little bit there, Shomi, but certainly can echo those sentiments. We've just made great use of video capture technology across any learning, and have made those available on our internal cloud servers, so that they're accessible for everyone from anywhere. And that has really been, you know, great in both increasing the availability and accessibility of learning, and to Raf's point, is really democratize the availability and spread of knowledge, which is awesome.
Great. Looks like we have one last question here, maybe. Given this uncertain economic circumstances for Canadian businesses, has Avanti had to shift their client outreach approach? If so, how have these changes impacted the different internal groups at Avanti?
It's a great question. You know, absolutely, we've had to shift both the way in which we outreach to clients, as well as, you know, prospects, in communicating our value from a new business standpoint. And so, you know, I think, again, thinking about how to deliver the client experience that we're known for in a virtual setting is something that we spent a lot of time thinking about. And we do that, you know, by trying a bunch of things, failing at, you know, a number of them, and finding success in others, and sort of trying to build on that. We've hosted, you know, client dinners and lunches where we send some of our clients gift cards for Skip the Dishes, and we all hop on the phone and talk about some of our common challenges and problems, which has been really great. It's been an opportunity for our clients to support each other. You know, we've also just really tried to continue to be a valued partner and lead with empathy. You know, we understand these times are challenging and uncertain. There's a lot of change. There's different ways of working. And so what we want to do is always try and be helpful. Obviously, we work with and have the opportunity to see hundreds of thousands of employees across Canada. And that gives us the opportunity and knowledge to really share some of those perspectives and resources for others. And so that's kind of the focus and approach in which we take. And I would say, obviously, it's been a lot more digital, right? There's no more trade shows to attend at this point in time, and that's a way in which we used to be able to spend some time with our clients and prospects, and now we're thinking about how we attend and host virtual events, as well as continue those outreach efforts in a more digital manner, be it sort of classic demand generation from SEO, or content driven marketing as well. So experimenting with a lot of different things in finding the right approach there. That's a great question.
Excellent. Maybe I'll pass it back over to you, Jillian, to wrap things up.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This was a really great conversation, and I really loved some of the messages here and the tips. I'd like to say a huge thank you to John, Carson, Raphael, and Shomi for joining us to tell us your perspective as recent alumni. I'd like to thank Pascal for leading this initiative, and I'd really like to thank Amin and David for your insights. This is a great session. Thank you all so much. And we're done for today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.